The Galactic Council was very old. It had been around for more than 10,000 years. 47 different alien species worked together in this council. They came from hundreds of different star systems across the galaxy. These species were smart and powerful. They had cured terrible diseases that killed millions. They had mapped distant nebulae that humans could only dream about. They had figured out how to travel faster than light. They had solved mysteries that would make human scientists cry with joy. But there was one thing they could not understand. On a planet called Kepler 442b, there were strange markings. These markings had confused every expert in the galaxy for 300 years. The planet was not special in most ways. It was just a rocky world that went around an orange star. The star was smaller and cooler than Earth's sun. Nobody would care about this planet except for one thing. On the southern continent, there were hundreds of tall black pillars. These pillars were made of a material like obsidian, dark and smooth like glass. Each pillar was exactly 47 meters tall. Not 46, not 48. Exactly 47, that was strange enough. But what made scientists from all over the galaxy interested were the markings on these pillars. Every single pillar was covered in patterns and symbols from top to bottom. The markings were beautiful and complex. They seemed to change when you looked at them from different angles. Sometimes they looked like waves. Sometimes they looked like spirals. Sometimes they looked like nothing at all. For 3 centuries, the smartest beings in the galaxy had tried to understand these markings. The Vrekshi were a species with incredible eyes and brains built for seeing patterns. They could spot a pattern in anything. They could see things that the best computers missed. But when the Vrekshi looked at the markings, they said it was just random noise. There was no meaning to it at all. Then the Thornax tried. The Thornax were not individuals like humans. They were a hive mind. Thousands of beings connected together thinking as one. They could process millions of calculations every second. Their collective brain was more powerful than any supercomputer humanity had ever built. But after studying the markings for 20 years, even the Thornax gave up. They could find no mathematical pattern, no code, no hidden message. The Peltharians were the oldest species in the council. They had existed for so long that they remembered when most other species were still living in caves. The Peltharians were master linguists. They had decoded more than 2,000 dead languages from extinct civilizations. If anyone could read the markings, it should be them. But after 50 years of work, even the ancient Peltharians admitted defeat. They said the markings were not a language at all. One by one, every species tried and failed. Some thought the markings might be art with no meaning. Others thought it might be a natural process, like crystals growing in strange patterns. A few scientists suggested it might be a language so advanced that no current species could understand it. Maybe in another 1,000 years, they said, someone would figure it out. Finally, the council made a decision. They declared that the markings were just a natural phenomenon. There was no intelligent design behind them. It was just the way the pillars had formed over millions of years. The planet was marked for mining operations. Companies wanted to harvest the obsidian pillars and the rare minerals beneath them. The mining was scheduled to begin in 1 year. That was when the humans asked to study the site. The council was surprised. Humans were the newest members of the Galactic Council. They had only invented faster-than-light travel 60 years ago. Compared to species that had been traveling the stars for thousands of years, humans were like babies. Their technology was basic and primitive. Their ships were slow and clunky. Their computers were laughably simple compared to what other species had. Why would humans think they could solve a problem that had stumped the galaxy's best minds for 300 years? Ambassador Jake Peterson went to the council station himself to make the request. The station orbited a planet called Centris Prime, the capital of the Galactic Council. It was a huge structure made of metal and crystal, gleaming in the light of 3 suns. Inside, representatives from all 47 species met to make decisions. Jake stood in the council chamber. He was a tall man with gray hair and calm eyes. He wore a simple blue uniform with Earth's flag on the shoulder. Around him sat beings of every shape and size. Some had scales, some had fur, some had skin that glowed. Some had 2 eyes, some had 6, some had none at all. The council's oversight committee listened to his request. The committee was led by Director Veltus, a Chronari. The Chronari were tall and powerful, with blue scales covering their bodies. Veltus had 4 eyes that could look in different directions at once. She looked down at Jake from her high seat. "We understand that the Vrekshi have already studied the markings," Jake said in a respectful voice. We know the Thornax and the Peltharians have spent many years trying to decode them. We are not saying they did bad work. Then what are you saying, Ambassador Peterson? Veltis asked. Her voice was deep and rumbling. She did not sound angry, but she did not sound impressed either. We are saying that humanity might have a different way of looking at the problem, Jake replied. Sometimes a fresh perspective helps. Sometimes an outsider sees what the experts miss. One of the other council members laughed. It was a Thornax representative, speaking with the voice of thousands. You think your primitive species can succeed where we failed? You barely understand quantum mechanics. Your pattern recognition abilities are average at best. What could you possibly offer? Jake smiled a little. It was not an arrogant smile. It was the smile of someone who knew something others did not. We offer the perspective of a species that loves puzzles. Humans do not like giving up. We keep trying even when something seems impossible. We think differently because we have not been doing this as long as you have. Maybe that is an advantage. The council members talked among themselves in dozens of different languages. Finally, Velthis raised one scaled hand for silence. Very well, Ambassador Peterson. Humanity has proven to be creative in the past, sometimes recklessly so, but creative nonetheless. We will grant you 6 months to study the markings. If you find nothing new in that time, the mining operations will proceed as planned. Do you agree to these terms? We do, Jake said. Thank you for this opportunity. As Jake left the council chamber, he could hear the aliens talking behind him. Some sounded amused. Some sounded curious. Most sounded skeptical. They did not believe humans would find anything. Jake did not mind. Humans were used to being underestimated. Sometimes that made victory even sweeter. Dr. Lisa Chen stepped off the transport ship onto the surface of Kepler 442b. The air was thin but breathable. The sky was a strange orange color because of the star's light. In the distance, she could see them. Hundreds of black pillars rising from the ground like ancient monuments. They were scattered across the landscape in patterns that looked almost deliberate. Lisa was not alone. She brought a team of 12 researchers from Earth. But when the other council observers saw her team, they were confused and surprised. There was Kevin Wright, a music teacher from Boston. He studied how music worked and why certain sounds made people feel certain ways. There was Amy Sullivan, who worked with children and studied how young minds learned and grew. Paul Martinez had been a graffiti artist before becoming an art historian. He understood street art and ancient cave paintings equally well. Nicole Foster designed puzzle games for computers and virtual reality. The list went on. A dancer who studied movement. A chef who understood flavors and combinations. A comedian who analyzed why people laughed. None of them were traditional scientists. None of them were linguists or code breakers or mathematicians. Researcher Thelmar was a Rekshi assigned to watch over the human team. His people had studied these markings for decades. He had multiple eyes on stalks that moved independently, letting him see in almost every direction. When he saw Lisa's team, his eyes quivered with disbelief. You brought artists and game designers to solve a linguistic puzzle? Thelmar asked. His voice sounded like wind chimes, musical but sharp. Where are your cryptographers? Your linguists? Your pattern analysis experts? Lisa smiled as she adjusted her equipment pack. We brought people who think differently. Sometimes the best way to solve a problem is to stop thinking like everyone else. That makes no sense, Thelmar said flatly. Maybe not to you, Lisa replied, but let us try our way. You have 6 months to watch us fail or succeed. The first month was very different from what Thelmar expected. The previous research teams had brought massive scanners and computers. They had used advanced algorithms and mathematical models. They had approached the problem like scientists, which made sense because they were scientists. The humans did something else entirely. They sat down. They looked. They sketched pictures in notebooks with actual pencils and paper. They took thousands of photographs from every angle they could think of. They came back at different times of day to see how the light changed the appearance of the markings. Kevin spent entire days just sitting near the pillars with recording equipment. He was not recording the markings themselves. He was recording the sounds the wind made when it blew between the pillars. Sometimes it made a low humming noise. Sometimes it whistled. Sometimes it created harmonies that sounded almost like music. What is the point of this? Thelmar asked him one day. The markings are visual, not auditory. Maybe, Kevin said, adjusting his microphone. But everything is connected. Sound creates vibration. Vibration creates patterns. I want to know what patterns this place naturally makes. Amy did something even stranger. She brought children to the site. They were kids from the research base, sons and daughters of the support staff. She showed them holographic images of the markings and watched how they reacted. The children are not trained analysts. Thelmar protested. What can they possibly tell you? Children see things adults miss, Amy explained. Adults have learned to see what they expect to see. Children have not learned that yet. They see what is actually there. She noticed something interesting. When kids walked past the holographic markings, they would unconsciously move their hands. They traced patterns in the air without realizing it. They were responding to something in the markings that their young brains understood but could not explain. Paul spent his time comparing the markings to every form of art he could think of. He looked at ancient human cave paintings. He studied Aboriginal dot paintings from Australia. He examined Islamic geometric patterns and African tribal symbols. He was looking for anything similar, any common thread. I am not finding matches, he told Lisa after 3 weeks, but I am finding rhythms. The markings have a rhythm to them like music or poetry. They repeat but not exactly, like variations on a theme. Nicole was building something on her computer. She was turning the markings into a video game. In the game, players had to rotate three-dimensional models of the pillars and line them up in different ways. She thought that making it interactive might reveal something that just looking could not. Thelmar sent regular reports back to the council. Every report said the same thing. The humans were wasting time. They were playing games and making art. They were not doing serious scientific work. The council should end the project early and start the mining operations. But Lisa kept her team focused. She knew they looked foolish to the other species. She did not care. She believed that sometimes looking foolish was the price of discovery. It was during week 7 that something changed. Nicole had been working late on her puzzle game. She was tired and her eyes hurt from staring at the screen. Almost randomly, she rotated 3 pillar models to line them up in a new way. The computer rendered the view from a specific angle. Nicole froze. Her hands stopped moving on the keyboard. She stared at the screen with her mouth open. "Lisa," she called out. Her voice was shaky with excitement. "Lisa, you need to see this right now." Lisa came running from her tent. Other team members gathered around Nicole's computer. On the screen, 3 pillars were lined up at a precise angle. Their markings overlapped in the view. Where the markings intersected, they created shadows and highlights. Those shadows and highlights formed a new pattern, a pattern that looked nothing like random noise. It looked deliberate, purposeful, designed. Is that real, or is the computer making it up? Lisa asked, her heart beating faster. "It is real," Nicole said. "I will show you." The next morning, they went to the actual pillars. They positioned themselves at the exact angle Nicole had found in her game. They waited until the sun was in the right position. And there it was, just as clear in reality as it had been on the screen. When 3 specific pillars lined up just right, their combined shadows created something new. Thelmar examined it with all his eyes. He rotated his head in ways human necks could never manage. He took measurements and readings. "This could be coincidence," he said, but his voice was uncertain now. "Random patterns can sometimes appear to have order." "Could be," Lisa agreed. "Or maybe we have been looking at this wrong from the very beginning. Maybe the markings are not meant to be read individually. Maybe they are meant to be combined." Over the next few days, Nicole and Paul worked together. They found more combinations. Different groups of pillars, when viewed from different angles, created different patterns. Some patterns were simple. Some were incredibly complex, but none of them looked random anymore. "We have something," Lisa told Thelmar. "We do not know what it means yet, but we have definitely found something real." For the first time since the humans had arrived, Thelmar looked excited instead of skeptical. His eye stalks quivered rapidly, which Lisa had learned was a sign of intense interest in his species. "I will inform the council," Thelmar said. "They will want to know about this." "Tell them we are just getting started," Lisa said with a smile. "The real work begins now." The breakthrough came during month 4. It happened in a way that nobody expected, not even the humans themselves. Kevin had been collecting sound recordings for weeks. He recorded the wind at different times of day and different speeds. He recorded how the pillars hummed and whistled when air moved between them. He had hundreds of hours of audio files. Most researchers would have thought it was pointless. But Kevin was not most researchers. One night he could not sleep. The orange sun had set and the planet's two small moons were rising. Kevin sat in his tent with his laptop, playing around with his recordings. He ran them through a program that turned sound into pictures. The program showed sound waves as visual patterns like ripples on water or peaks of mountains. He was just experimenting, not really expecting anything. Then he decided to do something random. He opened one of Paul's photographs of the pillar markings on a second screen. On a whim, he dragged the sound wave pattern onto the same screen as the photograph. They matched. Kevin's hands started shaking. He did it again with a different recording and a different photograph. They matched again. The harmonic patterns created by wind moving through the pillars were identical to the visual markings carved on those same pillars. "Oh my God," Kevin whispered to himself. His heart was pounding. "It is sound." The markings are sound made visible. He ran out of his tent at 2 a.m, not caring that he was in his pajamas. He woke up Lisa by banging on her tent. "Lisa! Lisa, wake up. I found something." Within 10 minutes, the whole team was awake and crowded into the research tent. Kevin showed them his discovery on the big screen. Recording after recording, photograph after photograph. Every time the patterns matched. "The pillars are like musical instruments," Kevin explained, his words tumbling out fast with excitement. "When wind blows through them at certain speeds, they make specific sounds. Those sounds create vibration patterns. The markings on the pillars are maps of those vibrations. It is like sheet music, but three-dimensional." "But what is the music saying?" Amy asked. "Is it just random tones or is there a message?" That question led to the next discovery. Amy had been studying how children reacted to the markings. She noticed that young kids did not see the markings as static pictures. They saw them as sequences, like frames in a movie. Adults looked at the markings and tried to find meaning in each symbol. Children looked at them and saw movement, as if the symbols should be played one after another. "We have been treating this like a book," Amy said excitedly. "But what if it is more like a film? What if these are frames that are supposed to be viewed in order, one after another, really fast?" Paul jumped in with another piece. "And the geometric arrangement of the pillars is not random. They are positioned in exact patterns. What if those patterns tell us what order to view the frames in?" Nicole immediately started working. She was the puzzle designer. She understood how to take pieces and put them together in the right way. She wrote a computer program that combined everything they had learned. The program took Kevin's sound patterns and mapped them onto the markings. Then it treated the markings as animation frames, viewing them in rapid sequence according to the geometric positions of the pillars. Finally, it combined multiple pillars together the way Nicole had discovered, using their overlapping shadows to create new layers of information. It took her 2 weeks to get the program working correctly. The team barely slept. They survived on coffee and excitement. Thelmar watched them work with growing amazement. He had never seen researchers so passionate, so driven. The Rekshi valued calm logic and methodical process. These humans were chaotic and emotional. But somehow it was working. When Nicole finally ran the complete program, everyone gathered around her screen. She selected 3 pillars near the edge of the array. She fed in Kevin's harmonic recordings, Paul's geometric mapping, and Amy's sequential viewing pattern. The screen flickered. Then images appeared. Moving, three-dimensional images. They were not clear at first. The resolution was poor and the images were fragmented. But they were definitely images, not random noise. They showed shapes and colors that could not be natural. They showed things that were clearly made by intelligent hands. "We did it," Lisa whispered. Tears were running down her face. "We actually did it." Thelmar was speechless. His eye stalks waved wildly. He made sounds in his own language that the translation device could not process. He was too emotional for the machine to keep up. Over the next few days, Nicole refined her program. The images became clearer. Kevin found better ways to process the harmonics. Paul discovered more geometric relationships between pillars. Amy figured out the timing, how fast the frames should move. When they were ready, Lisa sent a message to the Galactic Council. She told them the humans had succeeded. The markings were not random. They were a sophisticated data storage system that used sound, light, and geometry together. The species that had visited before had been looking for a written language or a mathematical code. But this was neither. It was something more elegant and more complex. The council sent observers immediately. Delegates from a dozen species arrived to see the discovery for themselves. Lisa's team demonstrated their process step by step. They showed how wind created harmonics, how harmonics matched markings, how markings became frames, how frames combined into images. The alien observers were stunned. The Frexy delegates examined everything with their superior eyes. They confirmed it was real. The Thornax Collective ran the data through their hive mind. They verified the mathematics was sound. Even the proud Peltharians admitted that the humans had found something genuine. "But how did you see this?" asked one of the Peltharian scholars. She was ancient, her skin wrinkled and gray. "My people studied these pillars for 50 years. We are master linguists. We have decoded languages that existed before your species learned to make fire. How did you find what we missed?" Lisa thought about her answer carefully. She did not want to sound arrogant. "You looked for what you knew," she said gently. "You searched for languages like the ones you had seen before. Mathematical codes, written symbols, things that made sense based on your experience." She gestured to her team. "We did not have that experience. We are new to the galaxy. We do not know what ancient alien languages are supposed to look like. So we did not look for what should be there. We looked for what was there. We played with it. We experimented. We approached it like children exploring something new." Kevin added, "And we come from different fields. Music, psychology, art, games. We each saw the problem differently. When we combined our different perspectives, we found something none of us could have found alone." The Peltharian scholar nodded slowly. "You had beginner's mind? In my culture, we have a saying. The expert knows the path but sometimes forgets to look at the scenery. The beginner sees everything because they do not know what to ignore." "That is beautiful," Amy said. "And true," the scholar replied. "You have taught us something valuable today. Knowledge can sometimes be a barrier to understanding." Thelmar approached Lisa privately later that evening. "I told the council you were wasting time," he admitted. "I was wrong. I apologize." "No apology needed," Lisa said with a smile. "You had every reason to doubt us. We are just glad we could prove that sometimes crazy ideas work." "What you did was not crazy," Thelmar said. "It was brilliant. And now we must see what message the Resonari left for us." The content inside the markings was more amazing than anyone had imagined. Lisa's team worked for months extracting and translating the information stored in the pillars. The council sent more resources. More scientists arrived from different species. They all wanted to help decode what the ancient civilization had left behind. The species that built the pillars called themselves the Resonari. They had existed almost 50,000 years ago, long before any current Galactic Council species had even developed space travel. The Resonari had been intelligent, creative, and deeply artistic. Their entire civilization had been built around music, art, and philosophy. The first pillar that the humans fully decoded contained a history. It showed images of the Resonari themselves. They were beautiful creatures, tall and slender, with skin that seemed to shimmer with colors. They had large eyes and long fingers that could move in ways that human hands could not. They used those fingers to create instruments and tools. The images showed their cities, towers that spiraled upward like seashells, gardens filled with plants that sang when the wind touched them, public squares where thousands gathered to watch performances. Everything in their civilization was designed to be beautiful as well as functional. "They were artists first and engineers second," Paul said as he watched the images. "Look at their buildings. Every structure is a work of art." But the images also showed sadness. The Resonari sun was dying. It was expanding slowly, getting hotter and brighter. The Resonari knew that in a few hundred years their world would become too hot to support life. They would have to leave or die. The images showed them building ships. They showed evacuation plans and debates. Some Resonari wanted to leave immediately. Others wanted to stay as long as possible. There were arguments and tears. The images captured their fear and their courage. In the end, most of the Resonari left. They traveled to other star systems to start new colonies, but a group stayed behind. These volunteers had one final mission. They would create a memorial, something to prove that the Resonari had existed. They would leave a message for whoever might come after. That was when they built the pillars. Kevin discovered something amazing in the 5th month. The pillars contained music. Not just any music, but the greatest works of Resonari culture, symphonies that took days to play in full, songs that told stories of love and loss, lullabies that Resonari parents sang to their children. He played one symphony for the team through speakers. It was unlike anything humans had ever heard. The harmonies were complex, using tones that human music never used. It made people feel emotions they did not have words for. Lisa cried. Paul sat with his eyes closed, completely absorbed. Even Thelmar, who had no human emotions, seemed moved by it. This is not just music, Kevin said quietly. This is their soul. They put their deepest feelings into these compositions. Amy found stories. The Resonari had encoded entire epic poems into the pillars. Tales of heroes and villains, of great journeys and terrible sacrifices. She translated one story about a young Resonari who climbed the highest mountain to bring back a flower for their dying parent. The story was beautiful and heartbreaking. They were not so different from us, Amy said. They loved their families. They told stories to teach lessons. They used art to express what words could not. Nicole discovered something that fascinated her. The Resonari had created games and puzzles. They had encoded riddles and challenges into the pillars, things meant to make the finder think and explore. One puzzle took Nicole 3 weeks to solve. When she finally got it, the solution revealed a joke. An actual joke that the Resonari had left behind. The joke did not translate perfectly, but the intent was clear. The Resonari had a sense of humor. They wanted whoever found their memorial to smile, not just to feel sad, but it was the central pillar that held the most important message. This was the largest pillar, standing right in the center of the entire array. It took the team 8 months to fully decode it because it contained so much information. The central pillar was addressed to whoever might find it. The Resonari had written it in the most universal language they could think of. Mathematics and musical harmony. Things that any intelligent species should be able to understand eventually. Lisa read the translation out loud to the assembled team. Her voice shook with emotion. We existed. We lived on this world for 20,000 years. We built cities and made art. We loved each other. We had children and watched them grow. We looked up at the stars and wondered if anyone else was out there. We dreamed of meeting other intelligent life, but we never did. Our sun is dying now and we must leave this place. Most of us are going to new worlds. But we, the volunteers, are staying to create this message. We want you to know about us. We want you to remember that we were here. We created beauty. We felt joy and sorrow. We asked big questions about life and meaning. We hope that whoever finds this, whatever species you are, whatever you look like, you will understand one thing. All civilizations, no matter how different, share the same fundamental truths. We all seek meaning in the vastness of space. We are all afraid of being forgotten. We all want our existence to matter. Please remember us, and in remembering us, know that you are not alone. Other species have looked at these same stars and felt the same wonder. Other civilizations have struggled with the same fears and hopes. We are all connected by our shared experience of consciousness. Carry our memory forward. Tell others about us, and know that 50,000 years from now we are reaching out across time to touch your hearts. The room was completely silent when Lisa finished reading. Several people were crying openly. Even the alien observers seemed affected. Thelmar's eye stalks drooped, which was a sign of deep feeling in his species. Kevin played the music that accompanied the message. The Resonari had composed a melody to go with their words. It was simple and beautiful, starting sad but ending on a note of hope. The music said what words could not. It said that despite death and loss, despite the end of their civilization, the Resonari had found peace. They had created something that would outlast them. Paul stood before the central pillar with tears streaming down his face. He reached out and touched the black surface gently. They were not trying to show off their technology, he said softly. They were not trying to prove how smart they were. They just wanted someone to know they had lived. They wanted someone to care. And we do care, Amy said. 50,000 years later, across an impossible distance, they made us feel something. They made us understand them. Nicole looked up at the darkening sky. The orange sun was setting. Every other species missed this because they were looking for data, for technical information, for science. They forgot that the most important things are not always logical. Sometimes the most important things are emotional. Lisa nodded. The Resonari understood that. They did not leave us their technology or their scientific discoveries. They left us their humanity, or whatever their equivalent of humanity was. They left us their heart. Thelmar approached the group slowly. How did your species understand this when ours could not? He asked quietly. Lisa thought about it for a long moment. because we are still young enough to remember what it feels like to be small in a big universe. We still remember how scary it is to think about being forgotten. The Resonari spoke to that fear, and we heard them because we feel it too. The discovery changed everything across the galaxy. The first thing that happened was immediate. The mining operation was canceled permanently. Every single council member voted to stop it. Kepler 442b was declared a galactic heritage site. This had never happened before. Usually, at least a few species disagreed on important decisions. But this time, all 47 species agreed completely. The planet would be protected forever. No mining, no development, no interference. The pillars would stand exactly as the Resonari had left them, a monument to a civilization that had been gone for 50,000 years but had finally been heard. Lisa's team became famous across the galaxy. They were invited to speak at universities and research centers on dozens of worlds. They appeared in documentaries and news programs. Children from multiple species learned their names in school, but more importantly, they founded something new. They called it harmonic archaeology. It was a new field of study dedicated to finding and translating message systems like the one the Resonari had created. Lisa became the first director of the Galactic Institute of Harmonic Archaeology. Her small team of 12 grew to include hundreds of researchers from dozens of species. They began searching other worlds for similar messages. They found 3 more in the first year alone. Not all were as complex as the Resonari pillars, but each one contained information from extinct civilizations. Each one had a story to tell. The impact went deeper than just archaeology. Something shifted in how the Galactic Council species saw each other and themselves. The Resonari's message had touched something fundamental. It reminded everyone that beneath all the differences between species, beneath the different technologies and cultures and biologies, there were shared experiences. Everyone feared being forgotten. Everyone wanted their existence to mean something. Everyone looked at the stars and wondered about their place in the universe. Species that had grown distant and formal with each other began to reconnect. They started sharing not just scientific data and trade agreements, but art and culture and philosophy. Things they had stopped valuing because they seemed less important than technology and progress. The Frekshi, who had not written poetry in over 1,000 years, published a new collection. It became wildly popular across multiple species. The poems talked about beauty and loss and hope. They talked about feelings, not just facts. The Thornax Collective did something even more surprising. They composed a symphony that required 17 different species to perform together. Each species contributed sounds that only they could make. When performed together, it created something that no single species could create alone. The first performance brought thousands of beings to tears. The ancient Peltharians opened their archives. For millennia, they had kept their oral histories private, saying they were too sacred to share with younger species. But after seeing what the Resonari had shared, the Peltharians changed their minds. They began recording and translating their oldest stories, making them available to everyone. It became a renaissance. Art and music flourished across the galaxy like they had not done in centuries. Scientists who had focused only on technology began to also study beauty and meaning. Engineers designed buildings that were artistic as well as functional. Mathematicians composed music based on equations. Humanity's role in the Galactic Council changed completely. Before, they had been the newcomers, the inexperienced species that others barely noticed. Now they were seen as valuable contributors who brought fresh perspectives. Other unsolved mysteries were reopened. Phenomena that had been dismissed as natural anomalies were studied again, this time with human consultants invited to help. Sometimes the mysteries stayed mysteries, but sometimes the human perspective helped unlock secrets that had been hidden for centuries. A year after the discovery, Ambassador Jake Peterson stood before the Galactic Council once more. But this time he was not asking for permission. He was being honored as a guest. Director Veltis spoke to the full council chamber. Her 4 eyes looked down at Jake with warmth instead of skepticism. Ambassador Peterson, your species has taught us something we desperately needed to learn. We had become so advanced that we forgot the value of simplicity. We became so analytical that we overlooked beauty. We became so certain of our methods that we stopped questioning our assumptions. Jake stood in the center of the chamber, feeling small, surrounded by beings from 47 different worlds. But he did not feel intimidated. He felt proud. We just saw a puzzle and wanted to solve it, Jake said humbly. That is what humans do. No, Veltus corrected gently. You saw people reaching across time and wanted to hear their voices. That is what you do. You saw an extinct civilization crying out to be remembered, and you cared enough to listen. That is a gift this council had forgotten it needed. The chamber erupted in sounds of approval. Each species showed agreement in their own way. Some clapped, some hummed, some clicked appendages together. It was chaotic and beautiful. Back on Kepler 442b, the planet had changed. It was now home to a permanent research station staffed by beings from many species. They worked together to continue translating the Resonari's messages. There were still pillars that had not been fully decoded. There were still secrets to discover. Lisa stood before the central pillar one evening as the orange sun began to set. She came here often when she needed to think. The black surface of the pillar was smooth and cool under her hand. Kevin had composed a response to the Resonari. It was a human melody that encoded a message back to the ancient civilization. The council had approved carving it into a new pillar, humanity's addition to the memorial. The message was simple but meaningful. We heard you. We remember you. You are not alone in the darkness. We will carry your song to the stars and share it with everyone we meet. Your hope that someone would care was not in vain. 50,000 years later, across impossible distance, you made us cry. You made us think. You made us feel connected to you. Thank you for reaching out. Thank you for believing that someone would listen. We did listen, and we will make sure nobody ever forgets you. Nicole walked up beside Lisa. She looked tired but happy. She had been working on decoding a new pillar all day. Do you think they knew? Nicole asked. The Resonari who built this place. Do you think they really believed someone would figure it out? Lisa smiled. I think they hoped. And hope across 50,000 years found an answer. That is the real message here, is it not? Not the technology or the method, but the idea that reaching out into the void, creating something beautiful and meaningful, is never wasted effort. Someone, somewhere, eventually understands. Very human of them, Nicole said with a grin. Or maybe very universal, Lisa replied, looking up at the stars that were beginning to appear. Maybe that is what they were really trying to tell us. That beneath all our differences, all species that look up and wonder, all civilizations that create beauty despite knowing they will die, we are all fundamentally the same. We all want to be heard. We all want to matter. We all want to know our existence meant something. The wind picked up, moving between the pillars. The ancient structures began to sing their song, the same song they had been singing for 50,000 years. But now, finally, someone was listening and understanding. The other species had heard only noise because they were listening for complexity. Humans had heard a civilization calling across time because they were listening with empathy. They had heard people, not just data. They had heard hearts, not just information. They had heard a species saying the same thing every intelligent being eventually says. We were here. We mattered. Please remember us. And humanity had answered in the most human way possible. We hear you, we care. We will never forget. That in the end was what made humans special in the galaxy. Not their technology or their intelligence or their strength, but their ability to hear someone crying out across impossible distance and to answer with compassion. The Resonari had hoped someone would care. 50,000 years later, humans proved that hope was never foolish, that reaching out was always worth it, that beauty and meaning survived even when civilizations did not. The pillars sang in the wind, and this time they were not singing alone.